And it's exactly 11:40. So we got set up at exactly 11:40. That's good.
I was worried we were going to have to come and do it while the other person was talking. I didn't want to be rude.
All right, so I'm Nancy.
I'm Phoenix.
And our talk is on the, maybe I should say, darn vulnerable Habit Helper IoT device, because there was the no profanatory language thing here. So first, how is this talk organized? Well, we have a small introduction. Then we're going to look at how the device works if it was a real device and you were the user. Abbreviated it everywhere. The DVHH IoT device. Lots of letters. Fun to say. And I will probably laugh while I'm demonstrating it. Just a warning. Then we'll look at our architecture. And then we'll look up how you can set up to use it yourself. We'll look at methodology for doing some IoT hacking with a few tips. And then Phoenix will be doing some hardware hacking. And then we'll take questions and do contact info at the end. All right, so previously, do you want to do this part?
If you want. So last year we did a talk on general IoT methodology for doing security testing. The device we used was a baby monitor because of some obvious reason. I'm going to use this picture in probably everything I ever do now. So if there are any therapists in the audience, look my son up in about 15 years. There's the other one. But for our test device, we purchased one of the more commonly sold baby monitors that they sold through Amazon. There were some limitations that we had in this. A lot of responsible disclosure things. It was just kind of bad because you couldn't aggressively test some of the stuff because of legality issues and nuisance lawsuits, and also you didn't want to irresponsibly disclose security vulnerabilities.
Like for example, they sent a tantalizing bit of tidbit about a debugged telnet with an IP address back in one of the requests, and it was just like, no, I can't go there. That would be going too far. So yes, you had to stop. And also, as you see, we had to black it out because they never responded and fixed anything. We sent them a list of bugs, and they were completely irresponsive, possibly irresponsible.
We sent it repeatedly because the company changed names about 5 times before we actually talked.
So, anyway, we had all these problems, but everyone was interested, but there seemed people were either worried about the legality of hacking IoT devices or they were overcome by the hardware aspects and were afraid of that. So we thought, well, there's all these vulnerable web applications out there and some mobile applications for people for hacking to learn how to do that. Why hasn't anyone come up with the IoT device with all the different pieces? So we thought we'd do the same sort of thing.
The one thing that we really like about this, and that's something that I haven't seen anywhere else, is that we actually built, it's a simple device, but there actually is a physical device too. So you can emulate all of it if you really wanted to for whatever reason. But there actually is a physical thing that you could hold in your hand that would be set up similar to what you would go if you went to a store and just purchase something.
So with that, I think we're going to then, that was the other thing that was a best-selling device. But we're going to actually see our device in action. As I said, there's a web application, a mobile application, which I'm hopefully going to project onto the screen at some point, and a physical device to all look at. So we're going to start with the web application. In fact, I'm going to do a lot of it there because it'll be easier to see. But let's just tell you a bit about how the device actually works. So escape out of here and go to the web. Everyone, I'm running this locally right now, so please leave my server alone for the moment. Okay, there will be actually a hosted solution on AWS, but only if people promise to play nicely with it. No DOSs or things like that. But yeah, so I probably am too. It's called the Habit Helper device, and so obviously we had to come up with an idea about how it worked. So let's see what Habit Helper does. Let's read the About page, get some idea. So Habit Helper was founded by Lizzie Hayden in 2014. She struggled with addiction to chocolate chip cookies, and after 20 years has been clean from chocolate chip cookies for 90 days. So she advises taking things one step at a time and remembering that no matter how bleak things look, there's always a way forward. So it's obviously to help you with your bad habits, is the idea of Habit Helper. And it does that by trying to interrupt your habit loop in your brain. Because when you have a habit, you have a cue, and then you do the habit, and then you get a dopamine reward. So instead of doing your old bad habit, you click this great IoT button instead, and it will give you a great image and encouraging advice about resisting your habit, and that will replace the dopamine. That's the idea. And if anyone wants to actually use this to resist bad habits, it won't work. I made it up.
It might work. You can give us some money if it does.
Okay, so more about how does it work. It works in several ways. First, if you're feeling desperate, we offer a live chat with a therapist. The discussion boards are there for less desperate times. Please click your habit resisted button when you have successfully resisted your habit. You get an awesome image to view, and we'll up your score on the scoreboard, which gives you motivation to keep going. And to keep things interesting, it only counts the first 23 clicks every day. So that sort of explains a little bit about how it's working in the About pages. All right. So I'm going to start with just do a little usage. Let's register a new account, the mobile app actually will do a web view for the registration part anyway. So we'll do it here. As you can see, for a security question, it automatically gives you favorite David Bowie song and fills in Life on Mars. So you don't have to think about that. Very secure. But you can change that. So, username. Anyone, what's a good username? Fred. Let's go with Fred. That's a good choice. All right, password. Let's try password. Doesn't like password. Let's see. Password 8. The best password ever. Yay. And our bad habit. Stealing pumpkins, I think. You have to have one, so. All right, so we'll just register a new account. I think that this is secure enough, the favorite David Bowie song. All right.
Just say that's fine. There's no security issue there.
All right, so I'll log in. We could do this on the mobile app too, which we'll show in a moment, but I just thought I'd go through the basic web functionality first. And then we'll pull out the device with the mobile app in a minute because you use the mobile app to configure the device. But yes, you could just use the web app if you just want to play with an insecure web app. It mimics the button here. So you have a button you could click in the web if you wanted to mimic it instead of using an actual device. But you should always click your physical button because it will produce more dopamine according to the advice here. But yes, we can click our button. We get this inspiring image. Yay.
Thanks, Google Image Search.
All right, so let's look at the scoreboard and see. I think the score service is down. Yes.
Maybe we're not actually online.
Well, yes, so I think the score service is down, which I can fix really quick. That's the good thing. That's why I decided to run locally today, as opposed to having to log into AWS.
I thought about actually bringing up a router just in case, but I thought that would be considered a little weird. But I mean, obviously, if you download it from what we have up there, you can put it on host on like AWS or anything like that too. We're just having to kind of do some weird things, so limitations of doing everything here live. Yeah, I see them there.
It's working on the other one. You're right, maybe. Let me see. Let's see what happens if we try this again. It's different randoms, and yes, it's still returning null. Oh,
Yeah, what's that?
yeah. Okay. I know it's not working. I can fix it. One second.
All right. Technical difficulties, sorry.
This happens because I don't care to show people off the administration area.
Oh, come on, show them the admin panels. What's the worst thing that can happen?
No, you can find the admin panel yourself.
See, it really is like a real IoT device you'd get at the store. It's 10515865. It's like one of the example things for the talk that we did last year. We had actually bought it was a IoT light bulb that you could turn it up and down like through your phone and stuff. And apparently the manufacturer had some sort of issue with it. So what they did was they patched out the network functionality so that they could patch it back in eventually. The device could only connect wirelessly. It's still a lovely light bulb, though.
Go. Scores are up now.
There we go.
So, yes. All right, so as you know, there's now at least one back-end service, sort of like most IoT devices. But yeah, so that's the idea is you can click your button. There's also a physical button, which we'll show you. You keep getting these, and we really got a score this time. Yay. And then if we view our score, we'll see Fred now has a 1. Yay. All right. And then the other things, we have some basic things in here, like updating your account settings. Like we wanted to update our bad habit to not be stealing pumpkins, or our password, we could do it here. And then there's the online therapy, which is my favorite part, I have to say. Someone tell me if you recognize this. What should we say? I'm having trouble. This is like my joke. I think it's hilarious, but. So, how long have you been having trouble stealing pumpkins? Anyone recognize this? Yes, I figured there are a few people who are
Old enough.
well, a lot didn't be. I saw it when I was in college, and I mean, so you don't have to be particularly old. I hope I'm not that old yet. Anyway.
Sorry.
But yes. So yes, our therapist is the famous Dr. Eliza. So that is just like my joke, I admit.
And this will go on and on until it breaks or you do.
And then you have the forum boards where you can either write a post or read posts. So if we go to reading posts, somebody saying the therapist sucks, posted by Duck. We can add a great comment. Let's see. Obviously, so it has all the normal things. You can upload a nice image to go with your post and put in things. So it's all the normal web stuff. Oh, I tried to put in a great alert tag. And it says, we love making your posts and comments look good with tags, but we can't allow JavaScript. That's too bad. So obviously we're thwarted. Okay, so that's the basics of the web app. Let me get the mobile app going and the physical device now.
I've got the physical device. And I'll go into more details on the physical device later here.
So we're going to go over the architecture in a bit. We just wanted to sort of general demo of this is, if you were a user, this is how you could use it. All right.
Ooh, there were sparks there that time.
Oh, that's not good. All right, let's see if this just works with mimicking the device onto the screen.
Keep in mind it's going to take about a minute to boot up.
Yeah. I have clicked a lot. Okay, let me try do the unplug and plug in thing again. See if we get the. There we go. Yeah, I had to authorize it on the phone first.
But this could actually be used to set up the networking on the button itself. You would use you would pair it with your phone and it'd take the network settings from your phone and use that.
Yeah. So the actual device, mobile app written, and yes, this silly thing that mimics it will occasionally, supposedly only once every 30 minutes, show a ad, which is what we have now. Sorry for that. I didn't think I'd actually gotten to 30 minutes today, but so you have the same basic options on the main page, and if you log in, I was already logged in as Lizzie, the founder. So it auto-logged you through. You probably saw that screen there. There's some interesting stuff going on with the auto-login, I'll just say. But you have most of the same options. Here you could check the score. There's a mimicked resist button again. The config is the one thing that's really different. You can update your account through the therapy or the forum through here. But the config is the config for the IoT device. And you have either configure the Wi-Fi of the IoT device or configure the IoT device. There's your two options. So if we go to the configure Wi-Fi, we have that we've already paired with the Habit Helper device. So it does Bluetooth pairing. And then you can configure the Wi-Fi for the device through here, which is necessary if you want to use it at all. So you can just enter in your SSID and the PSK, and it will work. Although I am not sure if it'll work automatically here on the guest account because there's the terms of service agreement. That won't be clicked automatically. But we're going to try it and see what happens. So it's Liscum guest. Yes.
I like your font choice there, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So, Lipscomb guest. Okay, I think I spelled it right. Yes. And no password. So we'll just hit start configuration, and hopefully the device is up by now. You think it's... All right, and there. So let's see what happens. It failed to do it. So I think it's probably the terms of service.
There's a captive portal on the network here.
So that you have to accept the terms of service for the Wi-Fi to fully connect. And so I was halfway expecting that was going to happen, and we could probably fake that if we logged in on the device and changed the MAC address to one that it already accepted. But yes, you're not supposed to actually be logging into the device. So that's unfortunate. It does
actually work. It's just not going to work with a captive portal, unfortunately.
That is, yes, I was afraid that would happen, but let's just say, but if this worked, you would hit start configuration, and it would tell you that it had done the Wi-Fi, and then you'd go back to the other menu here where you configure IoT device, which is the button you push, and then it will configure the device to work with the user who's currently logged in. So that when you press it, it knows that you're that user and sending off to the score service as that user. So you would click that button, and all it does is the click, it just automatically configures it. Should probably give you a toast. I should add that. Oh, it does have there. Error updating, check the IoT Wi-Fi and try again. So yes, there's a toast if it fails. So good. I forgot I did that. So that's how you would configure it. Sorry, the Wi-Fi is not working right. We should have brought our own router. But basically, you would just press the button that would give you that great burst of dopamine, and then you get an image on your mobile. It's the same one sort of thing here. You have the mimicked ability on the mobile, and you get your cool image and an updated score. So that is the whole idea. Lizzie obviously has to resist chocolate chip cookies a lot. Okay. So that's the idea of how it all works, and I think we'll go back to the presentation on the architecture choices, and how you can run this yourself. From current slide. There we go. One moment. All right. And I did give you all the warning about don't actually use the device to try to help with your bad habits. Right?
We don't want to be blamed if you can't kick heroin.
So this is like the basic architecture of almost any IoT device, and we definitely made it fit into this. So you have your physical device, which talks to the mobile app, with the Bluetooth pairing and talks to the cloud. That's where it updates your scored. And the mobile app talks to the cloud. The mobile app also talks to the web app, which is not here. And the web app, of course, talks to the cloud services too. So, I mean, that's just the basic design we wanted to fit in to be like all IoT devices. And what I would really like to do, but it would cost way too much money, is to have it set up on AWS so that if people wanted to register their individual devices, it would give you each your individual cloud. So you set it up, you get your own services to play with, and then somebody else, they get their own separate services in a sandbox. But I'm using 2 EC2 instances when I do host this on Amazon for just doing one. That would be 2 instances per device. And I did the calculation, if it got any bit popular at all, even a dozen people, I don't think we could afford it. So that's what I'd really like to do in the future in terms of the mobile as a way of running everything in the cloud. But you can always run things locally yourself, and the code will be available in a bit.
So in terms of what we wanted to do for actually building the device, I wanted to try to do something that was as cheap as possible. Part of it is I wasn't entirely sure how many people doing this would be people who are actually already in InfoSec. I was trying to also gear things that people who might be students or things like that, that people just wanting to get involved in this at a beginning level. So I wanted something that was cheap, so if you broke it or something, it wasn't that big a deal. Potentially reusable items or things that you might already have. And then also I wanted to have everybody on the same board. I don't know how many people here do any sort of electronic stuff, but in some cases like things like Arduinos and stuff, there are a lot of third-party manufacturers. And so you might have 50 or 60 versions of the same thing. And so if you had a problem and you were shooting me an email for help, I want to know what it is that you actually are using. Otherwise, I don't know if I can necessarily help you. What was the next one? So what we ended up settling on for this. Oh, I skipped one?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't use PowerPoint, sorry.
I don't know how you did that, actually. You must have hit enter twice, and then I just...
Sorry about this. This is my fault.
No,
but, yeah.
Idea.
The first idea was to go with the Amazon buttons, like for the dashes. I wanted to have something that was hardware accessible because that actually seems to be something that people are very, very intimidated by, but at a basic level is actually rather simple. And also, from when I looked at it, people are like, oh yeah, there's just a screw inside there. You take the screw out, you can open the case up and have access to the board. The problem is that, like somebody's wife, apparently Amazon does not like fun. And they started ultrasonically welding the plastic. So you can open it up now with a Dremel, and the problem with that is you have to kind of know where the board is, or else you're going to end up putting the Dremel through it, or through the end of one of your fingers, or something like that. And I kind of figured that like normal people wouldn't like to do this sort of thing, and I didn't want to get a bunch of hate mail like, hey, you jerk, why did you tell me to do this?
And when I tried to open one, I ended up destroying the button myself. So I figured, yes, he could open one successfully. I couldn't. I figured that, yeah, it was not a good choice.
Yeah, I mean, it was just way too much of a hassle. There are people that do things with these without accessing the hardware. They're piggybacking off the network for it. It just, I didn't like it. I didn't think it was a very elegant solution. And then again, I also did want to have some sort of hardware level functionality. Because again, it was, it's a teaching device. I wanted people to be able to use it to learn stuff.
So, what we actually decided to go with was something that was reusable and cheap.
What I ended up doing was I ended up going with the Raspberry Pi Zero boards, since they already had, I'm doing the Zero Ws because they already had inbuilt Bluetooth and an inbuilt network. They were inexpensive. You can get them easily. Well, they're supposed to be $10, but sometimes people kind of gouge a little on them. But I mean, hopefully production will ramp up on those and that won't be a problem. But also, if you had a problem with it, I would know what you were using, and there's already an inbuilt system for it, so I didn't have to worry about drivers or anything like that, because I'm very energy efficient. So, it just seemed like a pretty good solution. And I mean, additionally, if you started to get into this and discover that like in terms of the hardware parts of this, that you wanted to start expanding onto this or doing your own thing, you already had something that was really good to work with for a foundation.
So I did want to briefly say that how our device fits into what NIST put out in their network of things. And there's a NIST document out right now that's open for comment on IoT. I don't know if anyone's aware of it. That's 187 pages. I can't remember the name of it. I was looking through it. I haven't read all 187 pages. But yeah, they're trying to actually put out a standard for security, and it's open for comment right now. If anyone's really into it, you can probably find it online. But yeah, they originally started dividing things up into a sensor, an aggregator, communication channel, external utility, and decision trigger. And our sensor in this case is the button itself, which senses when a user does something, it clicks it. The aggregator is the software on the device. So there's an SD card in here, which we'll be supplying images for, which has some stuff that checks for the button press and knows what to do. That's the aggregator part. Communication channel is the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, which is used to communicate. External utility is your mobile app and or web app. And the decision trigger is going to be some actual software that's in the mobile app that tells it to display that great picture to raise your dopamine levels and help you resist your habit. So that's how we fit into how the NIST is dividing this. And yes, and also, yes, if you're interested in it, do look at the NIST paper on security that they have out right now. All right.
And just as an aside, in case you're not aware of it, NIST is a government agency that pretty much all they do is come up with standards for these things. So it's fairly, it's not really a political thing, but yeah, they just sort of come up with generic standards. So it just sort of makes everything easier to communicate to people.
And I feel like maybe the slide's in the wrong spot, but we'll go with it here. There's going to be available tonight. I didn't want to upload anything until after we'd given the talk because I didn't want people messing with my servers. But yes, the APK file which is, what you can download onto your mobile phone or use an emulator with, and that'll hook you into the servers automatically. But if you want to run your own servers, I have the code available too for the SCORE service in the main web app. And basically, the SCORE service you just run with Maven Jetty Run, and it's up and running. You don't have to look at the code. The main web app, the way I'm running it is using Tomcat 8, and it's just putting the WAR up there and running it. So the mobile app, you'd need to tell the main web app where the SCORE service is the one thing, and there is configuration for that. There's a very specific file you could edit before you compiled it that has that in there, which will be in some instructions. So that's all you'd have to do if you wanted to run those locally. And then for the mobile app, you'd have to go in and change the location of the web app and the SCORE service, and the IoT device will be configured automatically to know where those locations are. So if you do want to run it yourself, there's a little tiny bit more config, obviously, but it's not too bad, I hope.
We were trying to make this as simplified for people.
I mean, there's a database in use, but you don't have to set that up because I'll go ahead and tell you it's an embedded database in the web app. So that saves the trouble of that. It makes it a lot easier. Also, embedded databases do not like SQL maps, so no point even trying to run that. So, all right, so then we'll go to how you can actually build and set these things up. Mostly that is the hardware.
And I mean, in terms of some of this stuff, like the embedded database, we did make some decisions that might seem kind of weird, but we had reasons for them, and a lot of them are geared towards we wanted to make this as easy for somebody who didn't necessarily know a whole lot about it to figure out, because it defeats the point of an educational tool if you can't figure out how to turn it on in the first place. In terms of the hardware that would be necessary, obviously a Raspberry Pi Zero. You can use the non-zero versions, the non-W versions, but they're not going to have the inbuilt Bluetooth. You would need to provide a dongle or something like that. It's a just another point of complication there. You'd really probably want to go with at least an 8 gig SD card. You also want a momentary push button or a tactile button. It's what they're sold as. Most of the time, if you look at something, if it says it's a momentary button or a push button switch, that's going to be what you want. It's the ones that, just like your buttons on the keyboard, you press it once the thing happens. It's not like it's not like a button that you push, it stays down, and the machine turns on. It's something that, it's momentary. Again, almost every push button that you're going to see on electronic sites or, Amazon or whatever are going to be momentary switches. You're going to need some jumper wires, obviously, to connect them. Quite frankly, you only need 2 if you're doing that. Going through a cable, you're probably going to want 3. That's not that big a deal. They're incredibly cheap too. And then some sort of power source. I set everything up just to run off the regular power to plug in. Yeah, I don't like batteries. It's a weird, dumb pet peeve. And I kind of figured that I've got a 1-year-old, and contrary to what they tell you, you don't get a lot of extra sleep and money with children. I was kind of led to believe otherwise.
No one tells you that.
I thought that's how it went. But I kind of figured I was going to forget to charge the battery or something dumb was going to happen. It was just something else that could screw up. I am going to have to do that for some of the other things that we were planning on speaking at, because I'm not sure I'll actually have access to power cords. But another thing you would want is going to be a separate router. Just in general, if you're doing any sort of work on something that you're not sure if it's secure or not, you might want to have this segregated from, like, your personal home computer or like any IoT devices you have in your house or things like that. This is inherently insecure. That's kind of the whole point of the device. That's also another reason why hardware-wise it's very simple. It's basically just a button. We didn't want to go with like a camera or a microphone or something like that for something that was, broken when you get out of the box. We're not interested in seeing what you look like. We don't want to listen to your conversations or anything like that.
We might be doing that next year.
Yeah, the thing I wanted to do next year is a really awesome IoT device called the Bathroom Buddy.
No. I said no to that one.
Come on. Oh yeah, the nighttime clown that reassures you while you sleep.
I said yes to that one.
She said yes. Keep.
All right. Well, you might now want to also mention this great case that you got, which is awesome.
Who I totally can't remember where I bought it. I got it off Amazon, but I can't remember who made it. I think it's like a CL4 Labs or something. Yeah, actually it's on here, cl4labs.net. But yeah, I just thought it was real handy. It just sort of had a place to stick the breadboard and everything. So, I mean, it just seemed kind of like a really neat deal if you wanted to do any sort of electronics prototyping. And I mean, again, like most things in this industry, this starts out very simple, but depending on what you want to do, you can actually do something really complex. It's building blocks. It's like if you're programming, you do Hello World for your first program. You take that and then you build upon that and do things that are more, elaborate and beautiful.
And you might also feel like telling them about how you put this together, because there's one piece you had to solder, but you may not have to do that now. You want to talk about that?
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Some people might be interested.
Sorry about that. Yeah, one thing about the Raspberry Pi Zeros is that they ship without the GPIO pins. So you don't have a connector unless you actually solder one to the device itself. I believe that they've started selling in the last couple of weeks ones that are pre-built now if you don't want to do any soldering. If you already know what you're doing and you just don't want to waste the time, you can do that. But honestly, I would probably suggest going ahead and doing it. Soldering is a character building exercise. But if you're really concerned, I mean, that's actually one of the things about a lot of the hardware stuff that people were really intimidated by, is that I would suggest if you're really concerned about it, they sell really cheap solder kits. You can get them on any sort of electronic site like SparkFun or, you can just do Amazon or whatever. They're a couple of bucks. If you screw them up, it's no big deal, but they'll usually have LEDs or something like that, so to indicate that you did it correctly and it actually works. But yeah, soldering is kind of a skill like painting or drawing, where what you want to do in your head and what your hands do aren't necessarily always ending up the same thing. But it's once you start doing it, it's easy. I mean, again, if you're looking to do this for something to learn how to mess with this sort of thing, I would advise doing it. I just think the more experience you get in that, the better off you are.
And I mean, also briefly, while we're talking about setting up the device, as you see, after you get the Raspberry Pi, there's an SD card installed, which will give you an image for. You just, push it in pretty much.
Yeah, and if y'all, after we're done, if you wanted to come and see or whatever.
And then we plugged it into the power as opposed to using a battery. Easy. That's already available, that little plug. And then you just have the 2 jumper wires and the 1 button. So you just select it's ground and power, I assume, basically right into there. So anyone could pretty much do it. Yeah. So that's all there is in terms of putting it together. It's really quite easy.
Yeah, electronics-wise, this is very basic. But again, I mean, that was kind of the goal of this, was to have something so that you would actually be able to have a physical device that you could check against, an existing web app.
All right. So now I think we'll talk about testing an IoT device, because we already, as far as, getting the rest of the config, unless you want to set up your own servers, it's really going to be downloading the mobile app and then using it on either an emulator or a real device, the way we saw. I mean, that's all you'll have to do, and that will show you where the servers are. You should be able to find them at that point.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm really nervous and everything, but sorry. But one thing I did want to add, if we'll give our contact information at the end of this. If for whatever dumb reason or whatever, you just have a problem with something, by all means, let me know. Worst case scenario, and you just can't do it whatsoever. If you're not crazy, I'll even go over and help you do it. So that's not a problem. I mean, the thing is, we want as many people to be able to do this as possible. So I mean, don't feel like there's any sort of issue with contacting me about it. She won't read her emails, but I will.
Yes, he reads my emails.
They call me the NSA.
No, nobody does that actually. But, okay, so first, when testing IoT devices that you think are insecure, segregated test network, very good idea. Do you want to talk to that?
I mean,
very good idea.
The only real thing I can add there is that you probably don't want to get like the cheapest weird router that you can get like on Alibaba or like one of those sort of sites, because the router itself might not be secure. But just getting a regular router is not that expensive, and you can configure it so it's separate from your home stuff. I mean, you don't want to be uploading malware to your light bulbs or whatever dumb thing you might end up doing going another route.
All right, so when I start looking at an IoT device, the first thing I do is I come up with some ideal attacks that I want to try out. So it's sort of like I come up with a threat model of different things. So like on a camera, device, one thing we thought of initially was, let's see if we can substitute another image like they always do in movies and TV, that sort of thing. And then you sort of come up with some sort of models of, well, what sort of things am I looking at? Then you can go through and enumerate all your bugs and vulnerabilities and see if you can actually create an ideal attack that would be fun to show off. So that's how I normally start. But there are basically 4 areas to test on your IoT device: the mobile apps, the network, the web apps and the API, and the hardware. And we're just going to go through a little methodology really quick so that we give Phoenix time to do hardware hacking. So for the mobile app, it's really easy for both Android and iOS, and I may add an iOS app for this eventually. I haven't had time yet to write one that works well. But yeah, you do your static testing, and that's just like, yes, on Android, that's decompiling and looking at the source code. For iOS, unfortunately, that means like using IDA or something like that to actually look at the bytecode. Then you can do your dynamic testing, and on Android, that's mostly using the Android Debug Bridge. On iOS, I'd say that's like Cycrypt. And the network testing of your mobile, I always use Burp, but you can use whatever web proxy you like and hook it up. So that's the basic methodology to go through. And my tip here, which I wasted over 3 hours figuring this out one day, was that if you're on a Mac and ADB cannot find your real devices that are plugged in, use a powered USB hub. That makes all the difference.
Apparently the Macs don't put out enough power for it to actually do the connection.
Yeah. And my other tip that also wasted several hours on is if you're having Burp Suite and you're having trouble connecting to an Android emulator, set up a new APN and use 10.0.2.2 as the IP address, because that's your special IP address that represents the local host to the machine running the emulator. And again, it's like that alone. And I have trouble. I found that eventually somewhere in Stack Overflow online, but it's not, or at least at the time, it was not written anywhere easy to find.
Yeah, it was a hard enough, dumb enough problem that we're bringing it up so that you don't have, the same one.
Okay. So then there's the network methodology.
That's going to be, this is just what you do for any sort of device in general. You want to, enumerate what's going on so that you know what exactly is you're looking at, where the services are. If you can't see where the stuff is, you can't really do anything to mess with it in the first place. If any of you use Kali or something, most of these tools are going to be inbuilt there, so you'd go with like Wireshark or AirCrack. Like most things, there are several different ways you can go about doing this. So, I mean, while I have personal preferences, I'm not really going to say that there's a right way, but just anything that can, intercept traffic so you can see what's going on.
And then next, the web application methodology, which I really don't want to get too much into this because I think most people are familiar with that, and there are tons of sources out there, but it's just any web application testing. Look at your authentication, your authorization, your session management, for code injection, client-side code, etc. And the API is very similar, except no web app. You want to try to identify the API technology if you can, enumerate all the calls, and look for the common problems in APIs, which are like poor access control, IDOR, sensitive data exposure. But I think all of this is very well documented with other sources. So,
I mean, it just goes to general sort of reconnaissance, like what you would do. I mean, it's the same sort of thing you do in like penetration testing environment. You just want to actually gather information so you know what it is you want to attack. You want to be able to try to figure out where your vectors are.
The fun part is putting it all together.
Also, hardware methodology. This was something that a lot of people actually talked to me about that were very intimidated by. At a base level, this is incredibly simple, so I do have a really dumb, simple demonstration at the end of this. I'm not trying to, undervalue what any of this is. I'm trying to make a point that this is something that there is no reason to be intimidated by at a base level. A lot of people are incredibly intimidated by, like last year, to hardware access the IoT camera that we were doing, I had to solder 3 wires. People were looking at me like I split the atom in some cases. It was a little awkward. So, I mean, it's one of the things. You're here, if you weren't motivated to learn, you wouldn't be doing stuff like this. That's really the only requisite, qualification you need. But it's something that people get intimidated by, and they build up a big thing in their head and then don't ever actually get in, to doing it in the first place. But what you would do in general, you just take apart the device. Look at the circuits. There might be information about like what type of board they're using. You would look for your UART ports, which are used for debugging, and that's usually where you can find things. You'd also kind of see how firmware updates because, in case you happen to have like your own custom firmware, you might want to put there instead. That would be much better. And then just also if it has any sort of signing to stop jerks from doing things like uploading firmware. All right. Now, in terms of what you would want to do if you wanted to access this on a hardware level or if you just wanted to get started in that in the first place, you're going to want a device that's a USB to TTL cord. And if anyone wants to just come up here and look at it while I'm doing that, feel free. After all, that is kind of the point, is to show what's going on. But this guy just has a USB end and then 4 wires. There's 2 different types of these. The one I would recommend, like that one is a PL2303. There are other manufacturers that make it now. I'm assuming it must be like a patent issue and the patent's expired or something. I don't know, but you're seeing them in the last couple of years. But the other ones are FTDI. FTDI is the company. And they have a 2303, there's like an R, a Q, so I just put blank, yeah. Those are the ones that I would suggest because apparently it sounds like that there have been with the PL2303 that there have been a lot of quality control issues with them. And so you're starting to see a lot of vendors are actually selling ones that are made by third parties now because the chips in there's a little chip in there and apparently they're a lot more reliable. So it was one of those things where people were buying these devices and they just didn't work out of the box, which if you don't really know what you're doing at first, I'm going to recommend the one that's going to probably work. There are going to be 2 main sets of, also technically speaking, the FTDIs are USB to TTL cables. They're all sort of the same thing, but for whatever reason, you'll always see one of them referred to that and then the other one's referred to specifically as FTDIs. There are going to be 2 flavors of those. There's ones that have 4 cables and ones that have 6. I would suggest you getting the 6 because you can also do things like if you want to upload or initialize bootloaders on some devices, that's what you would need. They're about the same price, so I'm going to always tell you to get the one that can do more stuff. Also has, you probably noted already there is a red cord on these that is the power. If you put the power to the communications, very bad things will happen. They involve smoke, and there's usually an audible pop of some sort. That is actually, also the device won't usually boot. But yeah, so I just, if you're not sure about it, I actually do know where I'm putting the things most of the time, but I'll still look at the instructions because I'm just kind of that sort of person. But yeah, that's the sort of thing that, yeah, you don't want to be really sure what you do there. That's really the only one. The other big tip, don't touch the hot end of the soldering iron, even if someone dares you. Believe it or not, that actually does hurt.
He knows.
People have told me, and I've read it on the internet.
Someone dared him.
I got $5. But yeah, also, like what I said earlier, if you never soldered before, get a kit to practice. I mean, it's a good skill to have. Apparently, it's one of those weird skills that a lot of people just never do because they're just intimidated by it for whatever reason. And once you actually get started, get your hands dirty in it, you might discover that it's a lot easier than what you thought it would be.
So now it's Phoenix is going to do a demonstration, just a little one. I know.
Yeah, this isn't going to be terribly impressive. If somebody wants to come up here, you can. Unfortunately, I don't think I have a way to show what I'm doing up on the screen.
Just talk through it. Here, I'll hold the microphone.
All right, well, I need to open my VM up here. But all I'm going to do here is this is just a simple hardware interface. Yeah, all I'm doing here is going to be a very simple hardware interface. If it seems like it's incredibly simple, it is. Again, because I'm just trying to show that, this stuff really isn't as hard as people seem to think it is. What I have here is an FTDI chip, if you want to see it. And then that's just going to a regular micro USB adapter. But we're only going to be using 3 wires on this today. We are going to be using the ground. I'm hoping that everyone kind of knows why we want a ground on here. Just in case you don't, it's because we don't want anything to be ungrounded, smoke, etc. Additionally, we have the transmit and receive. The only really important part is that you're going to want to have your transmit on your cord go to the receive of the device and vice versa. It's just something people sometimes just don't think about. Obviously, the communications port that's set to receive isn't going to transmit data. So you just want to cross the wires. The original iteration of this talk was going to be me trying to talk people through soldering devices while I was telling them what to do, like people who'd never done it before. For some reason, somebody thought that this was a really bad idea, especially at some of the cons where there was a lot of drinking involved. I thought it was a good idea. But go ahead and unplug that for me, or I can do it here.
You want me to
I'll do it.
plug the device?
But yeah, let's see here. But there are different ways to do this. Some people can actually just go through screen. I've actually usually had problems with it. It doesn't give me all the information I want. But I'll usually just use Minicom. I believe in Kali you actually have to install it. I'm not sure about other Linux builds. But what we would do is we would connect our wires there. Just got the 3, like I said. There's a ground, a transmit, and a receive. Going to the ground, the receive, and then transmit on the other. Plug the device in, and I didn't turn this on like an idiot. Sorry, again, really nervous. But, this just brings up a terminal. Minicom's just a terminal emulation program. There's the, you need the password to get in there, but once you're able to do that, you have shell access to the device. Again, I mean, I realize this isn't that impressive, but apparently a lot of people feel intimidated, so I felt it was, valuable to kind of show how easy this actually is. A lot of devices are not secured in the debug port. So actually logging in this is more secure than a lot of the ones I've seen in the wild. In a lot of cases, you actually can go for a UART port, which will be helpfully labeled in most cases. No, I mean, it seriously, usually there's usually going to be 3 or 4 wires, and they usually will say UART on them. There's JTAG too, which is a little bit more complex, but you can usually literally solder a connector to them. If there's not one, connect some wires to there, put one of these cables on there, and when you boot the device, go into shells. Then you have total control in the device, which totally cannot be used for malicious purposes.
And the ones that do have password setups, it seems that a lot of times they have some very easy ones, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've seen.
You will find a disturbing level of there is a very disturbing level of hardware-coded passwords, particularly on anything involving cameras. The big combination one I've seen has been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have seen password, I believe, on some things. But I mean, the ones that have hardware code, like where they've actually sat there in the program and hard-coded the password, believe it or not, they don't actually use really complex secure passwords for some reason. It's as though security is not really what they're thinking about.
And the other thing you might want to mention is, I mean, you did have to install some drivers to make this work.
Oh, yeah. There is a driver. Those cords, they have a chip in them, which is what translates the data. There is a set of drivers for them, depending on what you're doing. On Mac, you'd have to go to the sites, I believe. I don't use a Mac, so I'm not super positive on it. But Windows 10, all the ones I've plugged into Windows 10 so far, auto-install. So, I mean, apparently the drivers are becoming common enough that you don't really have to do a whole lot. The sites, though, that you get them from will usually have that. That's the only downside, is that, like, a lot of the places that sell these things don't really tend to offer any sort of instructions.
Did that stay up the whole time and you never saw the screen for the VM?
Oh, I did put the VM screen up.
Okay, I was making sure because I could.
Oh, jeez.
PowerPoint has this really evil
I'm
habit I've noticed.
I'm going to close.
Versions of doing this.
I'm sorry, that was a mistake on my part. I'll do this again. How about that? It'll be real easy, since I've already got everything hooked up. I'm very, very sorry about this.
I've dealt with this in several presentations recently where I go from PowerPoint to demo and it's like, it doesn't show up. Evil.
Sorry, I just closed PowerPoint.
Yeah, just kill PowerPoint now. We have like maybe
I'm-
2 slides. Besides that, we can pull it back.
I'm really, really sorry about that. Die.
There, okay, you're back in the VM. That's good. So, it won't take long to do this again, but yeah, just let people see what it looks like.
But yeah, I'm just doing this to our Kali VM, and I mean, the only other thing is that obviously you're going to want to enable the USB device on the VM. Oh, I did it again. Performance anxiety.
Maybe you should even explain the options after you show this again that you had on the terminal command.
Yeah, and it's just and if you're on Windows, you would just use PuTTY to get into this. On a Mac, I believe that you could just do it through the terminal, through screen. I'm not positive, again, since I don't use a Mac, but again.
We intercepted the login again, yes, you see it's habit helper.
I mean, the only thing you really will have to do on the device once you have it wired up usually is that you'll have to reset it. In some cases, there are things that you can do to interrupt the boot process that will drop you into shells. But I mean, at a basic level, this is incredibly simple. So, this is just something I wanted to point out so that, you don't feel intimidated by it.
And I'll just point out that if you look at the comments in the web code, you'll find that there are 2 developers probably for the Habit Helper software, not us, like made up of developers Bob and Harry. And one of them seems to not have good understanding of things and do more insecure things. So they might be the one who's more likely to have the hard-coded password.
You're giving it away.
Yeah, just a hint to look for the comments. I mean, yes.
You're totally giving it away.
I didn't say it was.
But yeah, I'll close this out here and put our contact info back up for people. Again, I'm really sorry about I should have looked at the screen to see if that was up there. But yeah, here's our general contact info here. Oh.
I'll just make it big. It's fine. From current stuff.
Phoenix learns how to use PowerPoint. But you did that one, not me.
It's just taking its time to take over the machine.
But yes, again, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, please don't hesitate. We're both local to the area. We actually even live in the same house. Somehow. But yeah, we're both local here, so I mean, you know, if you get stuck and you just totally can't do it, then I mean, you know, I'll do what I can to help you out. This person back here showing me that we have 5 minutes, so were there any sort of questions that anyone had? Yes, sir.
Did you have to use a terminal command to connect to the USB device on the phone?
Yes, I had to use, well, no, I had to do one so that I could capture what it's showing. But yeah, you could do it through, what are you going to use, like Windows or Linux? You'd want to use Minicom. There is going to be the settings and help. On a Pi, the baud rate is 115,200. So you'd want to set that. But the one thing you'll notice is if you set like the baud rate wrong, or if there's like a hardware flow control or something that's enabled and it shouldn't be, you'll get data, but it'll all be garbled. Additionally, in some cases, if there's signal, like if there's a lot of line noise, you also might get garbled, but that's almost never going to apply in something like this. Here, I'll give you the terminal commands here for this. You're going to want to probably kill PowerPoint. Oh, is it showing?
Yeah. It's random as far as I can tell. Although having like Uber conference share screen or something makes it worse.
Well, it's... But yeah, you would just do that, which is just your device settings. But how you get the dev, you would want to look to see where the device was showing on your machine. In most cases, it's going to default to USB 0. If you got a bunch of other stuff plugged in, obviously it's going to bump to like, you know, USB 1, USB 2. You would just do, you know, a list for it to find it. But yeah, the one thing though is that if you have the settings wrong, you will get information. It'll just won't be anything usable. So that's a way that you know that the hardware itself is working and that it's usually just a setting issue. In theory, there could be line noise like what I was saying, but with something like this, it's very unlikely. That's just something for, you know, more advanced projects.
I assume, obviously, the -D is specifying the device name. Yes. What's the -B is the rate?
The B is the rate. I'm blanking on the O off my head. I want to say it's logging, but I'm not positive.
Obviously, we can man this command and get more, probably.
I've done it for so long that I just do it because that's what the machine tells me to do.
Anyway, so yeah, our webpage was insecuredevices.com. Can you believe no one had taken that? And
so
yeah.
if you want to download everything, we're going to have it hosted up.
We're going to upload the images and the APKs tonight. They're not up there right now, although there's a spot for them to be. But there's a link to the GitHub if you want the source code. But it's no fun to look at the source code, hack it first, and then look at the source code.
Yeah, it's cheating otherwise, and that would just be really bad.
So, any other questions that we could answer?
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm sorry about some of this. It's, you know, I'm sure that I have a little social anxiety here, so. But thank you very much. And again, I'm going to leave this out for a couple of minutes since I'm, you know, we don't have somebody coming after us. So if you want to just come up and see what's going on, you can, since the next thing's lunch.